You walk into a room full of strangers. Before you say a single word, before anyone speaks to you, your brain has already decided who is trustworthy, who is competent, who might be dangerous, and who you'd want to sit next to. That decision took less than a tenth of a second. You didn't choose to make it. You didn't even notice you were making it. But the real answer is far stranger than simple first impressions. Your brain isn't observing strangers. It's rendering a verdict on them instantly, using almost no information at all. Think about the last time you met someone new. Maybe it was a job interview, a first date, a new coworker at the coffee machine. You probably believe your opinion of them formed gradually, built from what they said, how they carried themselves, the small details you picked up over the conversation. That feels true. It also isn't what happened. Psychologist Alexander Todorov at Princeton ran a series of experiments that changed how scientists understand first impressions. He showed people photographs of unfamiliar faces for just 100 milliseconds. That's faster than a single blink. Then he asked them to rate the faces on traits like trustworthiness, competence, and likability. The ratings people gave after 100 milliseconds were nearly identical to the ratings they gave when allowed to stare at the same face for as long as they wanted. More time didn't produce a more accurate judgment. It just produced more confidence in a judgment that was already locked in. Why would a brain do this? Why commit to a verdict on a total stranger before there's any real evidence to go on? Because for most of human history, hesitation was the expensive option, not the safe one. A slower brain that waited to gather more evidence before deciding friend or threat was a brain that sometimes waited too long. The nervous system was shaped by a world where reading a face quickly could matter more than reading it correctly. Speed became the priority. Accuracy became optional. This is where the idea of thin slicing enters the picture. Psychologist Nalini Ambady, working with Robert Rosenthal, discovered that people could predict outcomes as complex as a teacher's end-of-semester evaluations after watching just 2 seconds of silent video of that teacher. No sound, no context, 2 seconds. And the judgments people made from those 2-second clips correlated strongly with judgments made from watching the teacher for an entire semester. Your brain doesn't need a full story. It needs a slice. It fills in the rest. That should unsettle you a little. Because it means the version of you that walks into a job interview, a party, or a first date isn't being evaluated on who you actually are. You're being evaluated on a fast, thin slice of you, assembled from posture, facial structure, tone of voice, and the first few words out of your mouth, before your actual personality ever gets a chance to speak. So what exactly is your brain scanning for in that tenth of a second? Todorov's research points to 2 dimensions that dominate almost every snap judgment of a face: trustworthiness and dominance. Trustworthiness gets read largely from facial features that resemble expressions of happiness or anger even on a neutral face. A face with slightly upturned features at rest reads as warmer. A face with lower brows at rest reads as more hostile, regardless of the actual person behind it. Dominance gets read from more masculine or angular structural features. None of this has anything to do with a person's actual character. It's pattern matching against features that, evolutionarily, once correlated loosely with emotional expression. Your brain isn't reading the person in front of you. It's reading a face-shaped shortcut and mistaking it for truth. Here's the counterintuitive twist. You'd expect that once you get real information, real conversation, real behavior, this snap judgment would fade into the background, corrected by the facts. Mostly it doesn't. Psychologists call this anchoring, and it shows up everywhere first impressions are formed. The first fast verdict your brain reaches becomes a lens. Everything that happens afterward gets filtered through it. If your brain decided in that first tenth of a second that this stranger seems trustworthy, you'll interpret their later ambiguous behavior generously. If it decided they seemed untrustworthy, that same ambiguous behavior gets read as suspicious. You're not updating your first impression with new evidence. You're bending new evidence to fit your first impression. This is why two people can watch the exact same interaction and walk away with completely opposite readings of the person involved. They're not disagreeing about what happened. They're disagreeing because their brains rendered different tenth of a second verdicts before the interaction even began. And every following second got filtered through a different lens. Now bring this into the modern world, where more of your first impressions are made through a screen than a room. A dating profile photo, a LinkedIn headshot, a thumbnail on a video call before anyone unmutes. Your brain runs the exact same 100 millisecond process on a photograph as it does on a living face across a table, which means the outcome of a job interview or a first date, or whether someone swipes past your profile, may already be substantially decided before a single sentence gets exchanged, not because people are shallow, because the machinery making that decision evolved long before screens existed, and it hasn't been told the rules changed. This also means something quietly reassuring if you sit with it. The awkward pause you replay in your head after meeting someone new, the sentence you wish you'd phrased differently, the moment you worried made you look nervous. To the other person's brain, none of that carried nearly the weight you think it did. Their verdict on you was largely already rendered before you opened your mouth. The version of the encounter you're anxious about is not the version their nervous system actually processed. There's a deeper implication buried in all of this. If a fast, mostly inaccurate judgment can lock in and then quietly distort everything that follows, then the confidence you feel about a person you just met, or a person who just met you, isn't a reliable signal of accuracy. It's a signal of speed. Your brain feels certain not because it gathered enough evidence, but because it's built to feel certain almost immediately, regardless of how much evidence actually exists. So the next time you feel an instant, gut-level read on a stranger, whether they seem warm or cold, safe or suspicious, competent or careless, it's worth asking a quiet question in the back of your mind. Is this a conclusion, or is this a reflex? Because the tenth of a second that produced, it wasn't built to be right. It was built to be fast. And the next time someone forms an instant impression of you from a photo, a handshake, the first 10 seconds of a conversation, remember that their verdict was never really about you either. It was about a face-shaped shortcut their nervous system has been running since long before either of you were born. You walked into that room already judged, and so was everyone else in it, by a brain that never bothered to wait for the truth.